breadth of the question.
Yes, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, maybe I'll start the CS nominee from his response to Mr. Ura's affidavit in respect to your suitability for appointment based on your professional academic qualifications. And he responded by saying that the fundamental criteria for appointment to such a position is based on one's ability to provide effective leadership and service to the public. And in that regard, you say you have the requisite qualifications to serve as Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, despite not having any training in agriculture. And probably you also didn't have any training in health when you served as Health Minister. But CS, in my view, you did well in terms of communicating, especially around the COVID time. You were on TV. In fact, people christened you the COVID CS. I would want to hear what exactly you intend to do, because, again, in my view, we have had a communication problem, and more so in the State Department for Livestock and also the State Department for Agriculture. You remember last year the issues that we had with subsidized fertilizer procurement and the communication that came around that issue. Towards the end of the year, we also had a similar problem. I had to withdraw a bill that came to Parliament from the State Department of Livestock, the Livestock Bill, largely on account of the disinformation that was being propelled in both mainstream and social media. And this bill is anchored on policies that are espoused by the government through the ministry. I would want to hear what you intend to do now as Cabinet Secretary. One, to provide that effective leadership within the ministry, to communicate effectively to the public what is contained in the bills that you will bring to Parliament, because Parliament tends, and in this case, my office of the Leader of Majority, we tend to take the flak from everybody, believing that all legislation that comes from government is authored by parliamentarians and the Office of the Leader of Majority. So I want to hear first what you intend to do to ensure that there is effective leadership in terms of communication. And as I said, in my view, you have done well in your previous postings, whether it was in ICT or in health. To CS, I've also noted from your CV and the documents that have been submitted, as Cabinet Secretary in the past, you have served for 2 years in all the ministries you have served. Is it coincidence or fate? Because you are CS Health for 2 years, you are CS ICT again for 2 years. Are you going to be CS Livestock Agriculture for 2 years since you are being appointed in 2025? I don't know whether it's fate or by design. Lastly, you have spoken at length on the nexus between farming and the profit and loss for the farmer and what you would want to see in the ministry. We have also heard from government, especially from the president, that we have now, as a country, fixed our production side. I would want to hear, and again, based on your training as a student of commerce, what exactly do you intend to do to ensure that there is a proper nexus between the productivity that we are saying we have increased, whether it's sugar, whether it's maize, whether it's rice. How do you link that to markets? And bearing in mind that coffee, the coffee you are speaking about drying in your younger years, most of the marketing is done in the Ministry of Agriculture. It's in our State Department, in cooperatives, I think. Whether it is milk, again, you produce, the marketing is with someone else. Coffee you produce, tea you produce, marketing is done by someone else. How are you going to create that nexus to ensure that also the country benefits from your experience as a marketer and as a student of commerce to make farming profitable, not just for future farmers, but even for our current farmers, many of who probably are not as tech savvy as the younger generation. And I would really want, I was looking to hear when you spoke about the P&L, how you intend to get that nexus between the good productivity that we now have to making profits for farmers to make it profitable, because that's the only way you'll be able to sustain. this sector has been riddled by cartels, whether it is in the tea sector, coffee sector, milk sector. There are cartels all over. And we have seen in the past people come into this office, very good-looking people like yourself, with very good intentions, but they get swallowed by the cartels.
Thank you.
How do you intend to protect yourself from being swallowed by these coffee cartels, tea cartels, milk cartels?
Brevity.
Mr. Chairman, you'll agree that there's quite a bit to respond to here, but I'll try and be as brief as I can.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Let me start with the issue of communication, because I think that is what you laid emphasis on. I think the first thing to remember is that in my capacity, if I'm approved by this committee, in my capacity as a cabinet secretary, I am simply a cog. I'm simply part of a cog of people and stakeholders that must be involved in the decision-making processes that you have referred to.
You can't be part of a cog. You can be a cog in a wheel.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman. One of the cogs. That is what I am. And Mr. Chairman, the long and short of it is the following, that it is not possible to make progress in that area unless we work together with the stakeholders. We have got to have a consultative approach to these things. Cows belong to individuals. Maize in chambers belong to individuals. They don't belong to the government. You know, coffee in coffee farms belong to individuals. So any decision that we make has got to be made with those individuals who are the owners of the of whatever products and commodities that we are going to be discussing. That's number one. Number two is that they are experts in these areas. They are also experts who have been trained to make decisions in those areas. And I'll tie that up with what you said about COVID. The issues of COVID, which I'll come to on its own at some point if the chairman will allow. And to say the following, that part of the reason why there was so much necessity of communicating virtually every day to the people is the weighty issue that was at hand. You are talking about life and death of people. And therefore, you need to keep them abreast with any issue that is developing in relation to their own lives. Because that is what it came down to. Similar, and that's why we had a press conference virtually every day, whether it was made by myself or other players, or other ministry officials. It was determined, we determined that that is the way we were going to handle communication to them. Now, to do so, we got the right information from the people who are technically qualified to give that information. We had epidemiologists, you know, led by one Professor Anzara, who informed us about the right thing to tell people and the information that people need in order for them to make their own decisions. So the first thing is that we have got to be consultative. We have got to make people, we have got to consult people. We have got to consult the owners. We have got to, the owners of agriculture. We have got to consider the experts of agriculture so that as we make progress, we move together. We work together. If you take an example, and I mentioned coffee, even sugar. You know, you cannot make decisions about sugar unless we involve the person who is actually going out there growing sugar, you know, on day-to-day basis. The sugar actually belongs to him. And there is also obviously consultations with the other bodies, for example, this organization, you know, the National Assembly and the Senate. There are institutions that are involved in what we are doing at the ministry. And you will remember, Mr. Chairman, that agriculture is essentially a devolved function. In Schedule 4 of the Constitution, there are the areas that are supposed to be handled by the county governments, and it divides it into areas that are also supposed to be handled by the national government. So we have to involve the stakeholders who are going to be largely, and to a large extent, the county governments. So in terms of communication, I want to be clear that we are going to establish a very robust, you know, communication system that is going to be both in mainstream media as well as social media. And I know that Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Leader of Majority spoke about the ills sometimes, the negatives that come. I think sometimes we have to agree that in this day and age in the democracy, we have got to take both the positives and the negatives, and they are going to keep coming anyway, and that is not going to change. So I think for me, what I would like to do is use the same social media, use the same mainstream media, work with the fourth estate to try and disseminate information as much as I can to the farming community. And it won't be the first time, because during the period you have referred to, during the COVID period, part of the key players in terms of dissemination of information and the buy-in to the activities of government was actually members of the fourth estate. They are the ones who assisted us to succeed. And I want to say that my intention is to continue to work with the fourth estate as openly and as transparently as I can. We will be criticized, and that's fine too, because oversight is part of their job. So I intend to keep very closely, to work very closely with them. The area of social media. Social media is an area that has come to both help us. It helps us a great deal. There is also the negativity in the social media. And I know that, Mr. Chairman, if one were to talk broadly and say leadership has been made that substantially harder, through social media. But part of the hardship hardship and headaches that one gets from social media is also part of the way that we can communicate more easily, to our people, because they are also on social media. And that which you cannot change, you might as well use, because we are not going to be able to change some of the communication channels that exist. And indeed, we can use them very positively for ourselves. Mr. Chairman, there was a nexus that the Honorable Leader of the Majority wanted me to explain, and that's the issue of the PLL and the production capacity that has clearly increased. It's a fantastic example of what I'm talking about. The reason why the production has increased is twofold. One is because of the good climates that we have fortunately experienced. But two, and to a large extent, is also subsidized fertilizers. It's part of the reason why this increase has come in almost all products, both cash crop and as well as food crops. There has been an increase. Now, when you increase production and you are able to save on post-harvest challenges, it means that the farmer gets this bigger quantity that he has got. But the market is huge. The market for these products is not just here. The market for both livestock as well as crops is both in Kenya and external. Information about the markets is what has largely been missing. And part of this is also the deployment of technology. Because now, with a mobile app, you are able to tell where tomatoes have got better prices instantly. But this information is around somewhere, floating somewhere in the market. It's our responsibility as ministry to make sure that that information is available. You also alluded to the issue of the fact that the marketing aspect of most of those cash crops, the boards and everything, is in the Ministry of Cooperatives. That's fine too, because we work in a collective area. We have collective responsibility. Every ministry in government will automatically have to relate with another ministry in government. And it is not just the Ministry of Cooperatives that we have got to work with. We have got to work with the Ministry of Energy, for example. Right now we are waiting for the Ministry of Energy to connect to Kenani, to the Kenani leather park that the ministry is establishing. We are waiting for the Ministry of Water, to also connect water. So we will have to work collectively. We have to work together. Again, coming back to the example that you gave, if you look at the management of COVID-19, it was a whole government approach, whereas the central ministry was the Ministry of Health. The activities that were happening, keeping law and order, the Ministry of Health does not have any askaris. That is Interior that was assisting us in keeping order. The Ministry of Health does not have, is not in charge of matatus and so on. Yet, we are to contain, even containment measures included the transport sector. So we have to work with the CS for transport. Education is not part of health, but it was a huge, huge part of the activities on the Ministry of Health during the COVID period. That too simply illustrates that you need to work